warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon once again. So we are back here to see another subtopic as far as the Quran is the question of the Quran is being concerned. So we have happened to see the rules of recitation. We have seen the recitation. We have seen the variant reading. So let us happen to see the writing. The writings are because we have seen the Quran find has been written, so it has the writing, the concept of putting it on paper, which people did it, and so on. So let us happen to see this. That's what I want to see under this subtopic. So let us say that before printing was widely adopted in the 19th century, the Quran was transmitted in manuscripts made by calligraphers and copyists. That before the invention of technology, whereby there was printing of using these typewriters and so on, the various machines, those who read those who presented computers in the first generation, we shall see that earlier on people wrote the Quran on papers, but in various calligraphies. So calligraphies, those who happen to go to computers, there's where you will find the fonts. So those are there's a font which is called calligraphy. So they happen to write the Quran in various calligraphy. So when you happen to meet, I'll try to get for you some pictures of how the Quran was being written. The earlier pictures of how the Quran looked like before it was being taped to the papers that you're having today. We shall say that the earliest manuscripts were written in Hijaz type script. So Hijaz type script is a type of calligraphy. That's the calligraphy under which the Holy Quran was being written. Actually, these people, they used to get brushes. For instance, this is a pen. They used to get brushes. They dip them into ink, then they write. So because by then there was no technology. But in the 19th century, we shall see that there was advancement of technology and machines were being manufactured which were being used to type and write what we have in today. So the Hijaz style manuscripts nevertheless confirm that transmission of the Quran in writing began at an early stage. So the Hijaz style manuscripts nevertheless confirm that transmission of the Quran in writing began at an early stage. That initially, this one testifies that the transmission of the Quran began earlier, right? So with the Hijaz, with the Hijaz style, probably in the 9th century, scripts began to feature thicker strokes, which are traditionally known as Kufic scripts. So we shall say that earlier, even in the 9th century, there was transmission of the Quran, but thicker strokes. What do I mean thicker strokes? That they wrote, but with thick ink. So we shall see. So under this, we shall see that towards the end of the 9th century, new scripts began to appear in copies of the Quran and replace earlier scripts. That these copies by the end of the 9th century started to appear, but with thicker strokes. Actually, what I mean thicker strokes, the ink which is kind of a bit thick. So the reason for discontinuation of the use of the earlier style was that it took long to produce and the demand of copies was increasing. So copyists would therefore choose simpler writing styles. So that the earlier on scripts, the writing was a kind of bit that producing a copy of the Quran would take some good time, yet the demand was high. So these writers, they tended to move into a simpler method of writing. That is, they could meet the demand which they had, which was on market. So by the beginning of the 11th century, the styles of writing employed were primarily the Nashk, the Mushaka, Rahani, and on rare occasions the Thuluth script. Nashk was so we shall say that variant ratings by the beginning of the 11th century, various ratings came up in place, which we have seen, for instance, the Nashk, the Mshak, then the Rahanin, and the Rarer, and on rare occasions the Thorotho script. So the Nashk was in very widespread use. So the Nashk was in widespread out of the other writings, but the Nashk was very widespread in use. In North Africa and Spain, the Maghreb style was popular. So as I said, in North Africa and Spain, and the Maghreb style was more popular. So, but the Maghreb style took over areas of North Africa and Spain. More distinct in the Bahari script, which was used solely in the north of India. Nastaliq style was also rarely used in Persian world. So here they are trying to show us the various writings which happened to come up immediately after the 11th century. So just that most of these areas were being taken up by various readings. So by the beginning, in the beginning, the Quran did not have vocalization. So sorry. There has been some improvement. So we are moving. So she said, in the beginning, the Quran did not have vocalization markings. The system of vocalization, as we know it today, seemed to have been introduced towards the end of the 19th century. It would have been too costly for most Muslims. It would have been too costly for most Muslims to purchase a manuscript. So copies of the Quran were held in mosques in order to make them accessible to people. So it was that actually we saw it earlier that earlier on the Quran never had marking. So the vocalization, for instance, reciting in the various voices and various tones and so on, the vocalization adding some vocals to it, it was introduced towards the end of the 19th century. So we shall say that on top of that the copies of the Quran were very difficult to be purchased by Muslims because the writing material is very hard to get. Even those who wrote it down, it took them quite some good time. So for you to afford it, it could be very expensive. So what these people did, they got copies and placed them into mosques. So for those who wanted to recite the Quran, they could move to mosques because at times these mosques combined. They bought a piece of the Quran, a copy of the Quran, then the Mamuma would recite. So the copies frequently took the form of series of 30 parts of juzes, so that the copies frequently took form of a series of 30 parts of juzes. So that the Qurans by then they took parts of juzes, so they couldn't produce one as a whole. In terms of productivity, the Ottoman copists provided the best example. This was in response to widespread demand and unpopularity of printing methods, and for authentic reasons. So that for the Persians, that for the Ottoman copies, for them they came up with something different. That for them they happened to produce more copies and in a whole to meet the demand which was on the market. So you have happened to see the rating of the Holy Quran. We have seen the variant ratings and which the Quran was written before the introduction of the typewriters. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.